Always take two things when you leave home, your phone and your wallet. That's what we have been hearing for years. But in India, even if you forget your wallet, it's mostly fine because your phone has UPI. India's homegrown digital payment system. Almost every Indian uses UPI nowadays. You take out your phone, you scan the QR code and you transfer the money. India logs around 440 million UPI transactions every day. And guess what? You can use it in France too. France is the first European country to adopt UPI, so we decided to see how it works. Where in Paris can you use UPI? Take a look. Picture this. You've just landed in Paris. You're excited to see the Eiffel Tower. But first, you need tickets. So there are two options. You either search for a money exchange counter, fumbling for some cash, or you use your card, getting hit by foreign transaction fees. Sounds like a lot of trouble. But not anymore. Because now, for the first time ever, you can simply pull out your phone, scan a QR code, and pay using the good old UPI, just like you would back home in India. And I'm about to try it out myself. So let's buy a ticket to go and see the Eiffel Tower. The process is quite simple. I have my Eiffel Tower ticket portal open here, and there is a UPI QR code right on the screen. All I have to do is open my banking app, scan it, and just like that, I have bought a ticket to see this iconic symbol of Paris. No forex, no card fees, and no additional charges. UPI, we know, has become a part of daily life in India, but it does feel a bit surreal to be using it here. France is the first European country to adopt UPI. India's Unified Payments Interface Service. The deal was initially signed in 2022. It was between the NPCI, the National Payments Corporation of India, and Lyra, France's fast and secure online payment system. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi talked about it during his 2023 visit to France.
फ्रांस में भारत के यूपीआई के उपयोग को लेकर भी समझौता हो गया है। अब मैं तो समझौता करके चला जाऊंगा, आगे बढ़ाने का काम आपका है। साथियों, आने वाले दिनों में इसकी शुरुआत आईफेल टावर से की जाएगी।
In February 2024, the service went live, with the Eiffel Tower being the first merchant. The choice makes perfect sense. The Eiffel Tower is the world's most visited monument. It welcomes 6 to 7 million visitors every year. Indians make up the second largest group of international visitors. With UPI, things have become a lot easier for them. And it's not just the Eiffel Tower. UPI is now accepted at Galeries Lafayette, one of the biggest shopping destinations in Paris. Again, picture this. You walk into your favorite store, pick up a bag or a dress, and pay using UPI. No card, no cash, just a simple scan. This is not just about convenience. It's a massive leap for India-France relations. The adoption of UPI shows the confidence France has in India's digital ecosystem. It's also a huge moment for the fintech sector back home. It proves their technology is good enough to be adopted anywhere in the world. And it's not just stopping with France. More and more European countries want to adopt UPI. Years ago, Western tech was seen as the gold standard, but India has come leaps and bounds in the last decade. Digital finance is one area where India can rival and perhaps outperform Western technology. As of today, 7 foreign countries use the UPI system. For Indian travelers, this is all about convenience, but for other countries, especially in the global south, this is a template. UPI can help them bridge the financial divide, just like it did in India.
It's called rail bus because it has a combination of feature of both the rail and the bus. Rail because it will run on the rails, and bus because of the flexibility that this system will have to maneuver within the areas and serve also the first and last mile in Dubai.
We're here at the World Government Summit at Madinat Jumeirah in Dubai, and behind me you can see the rail bus, which is the RTA's latest solution to traffic in the city and urban transport. Now it carries 40 passengers and travels at around 100 kilometres an hour, and it's 3D printed, and we're going to hear more about that today from the RTA themselves.
Rail bus is a sustainable system which will depend mainly on getting energy from the solar system. Also, it's the components of building the train is from recycled materials. This type of system will complement our transit system, such as Dubai Metro and Dubai Tram. It will mainly serve the first and last mile. It's the people who will have to walk to the station from their destination or from their trip generation. They will use this type of system to get to the metro system, and then, they get connected to the rest of the communities within Dubai.
Nearly $500 million in food aid is reportedly at risk of spoilage as it sits on ships, in ports, and at warehouses after the Trump administration froze funding for the U.S. Agency for International Development, or USAID. The findings come from a new report this week from USAID's Inspector General. The Inspector General warned of the risks of safeguarding and distribution of more than $8 billion in unspent humanitarian aid after the White House pulled nearly all of USAID's workforce off the job worldwide amid a review of U.S. foreign aid programs. A federal judge on Friday did block the Trump administration from placing 2,200 agency employees on administrative leave, but that's just a fraction of the workforce. USAID provides food, medicine, and essential services to more than 100 countries and buys food directly from American farmers and ag businesses, which provide around 40% of global food assistance, according to a 2021 report from the Congressional Research Service. Some American farmers are worried about their income taking a hit with purchases from the agency in jeopardy, including sorghum farmers in Kansas, according to the Topeka Capital Journal. USAID historically buys foods such as wheat, soybeans, sorghum, and split peas from the American ag industry. Currently, $489 million worth of food is in limbo at ports, in transit, and in warehouses at risk of spoilage due to unanticipated storage needs and diversion, according to the Inspector General's report. It also notes an additional 500,000 metric tons of food is currently on ships or ready to be shipped to countries in need. The CEO of Spoonfuls, which repurposes excess food from grocery stores and other companies for aid organizations, tells CBS News if the food is not delivered, it will end up in a landfill. President Donald Trump and Elon Musk, the head of the Department of Government Efficiency, have taken aim at USAID as they work to cut trillions of dollars in what they've deemed government waste. Musk has said USAID should be shuttered and called it beyond repair.
Now the clock is ticking for the Trump administration to restore some websites wiped from the internet. Late last month, a number of government sites went dark to comply with an executive order requiring agencies to scrub terms related to gender ideology. It impacted public health pages and data sets posted by the Centers for Disease Control and the Food and Drug Administration. Today, a federal judge ruled the information must be restored to those sites by midnight.
As President Donald Trump looks to follow through with his campaign promise to expand tax cuts passed during his first term, Republican lawmakers are looking for ways to make it happen, and that could impact millions of student loan borrowers. Among plans floated by House Republicans are new taxes on college scholarships, a hike in taxes on university endowments, and an end to student loan repayment plans. One of the first repayment plans on the chopping block is likely former President Joe Biden's Saving on Valuable Education, or SAVE plan. It's the most forgiving income-driven student loan repayment program to be enacted since Congress created income-driven repayment plans in the 90s to help make people's bills more affordable. The plans cap how much a person can be made to repay their student loan every month based on how much they earn, and cancels any leftover debt after a certain amount of time, most often 20 to 25 years. The SAVE plan, which has been tied up in legal challenges since the Biden administration put it in place, would lower monthly payment requirements even more and offer debt forgiveness for those who took out smaller loans of less than $12,000 faster. GOP lawmakers estimate the savings from overhauling the student repayment plan would be more than $127 billion over 10 years. The recommendations are not set in stone just yet, nor is it clear if or when they would actually be implemented. According to the Institute for College Access and Success, the average student loan borrower could end up paying around $200 more a month if Republican plans to reshape the repayment program are implemented. However, they say the changes to the student loan system are likely to only impact new borrowers.
In Hawaii, the Kilauea volcano has erupted again, shooting lava high into the air at a time when a severe winter storm is slamming parts of the mid-Atlantic. The volcano on Hawaii's Big Island began spewing lava Tuesday morning inside the Hawaii Volcanoes National Park. In the U.S., a powerful winter storm has caused chaos from Kentucky to New Jersey.
In the UK, where the government have been advised to show empathy to children who identify as animals. The guidance came from the Children's Society. That's a taxpayer-funded charity that is supposed to protect children from exploitation. Now, follow the logic here, because maybe it's not as crazy as it seems if you subscribe to radical gender theory. I mean, if a man can identify as a woman, who's to say a man can't identify as a cat or even a llama? Indeed, the UK Health Minister, Ashley Dalton, recently said people who identify as llamas should be afforded dignity and respect. Caleb and Liz, I would say that's a classic case of woolly thinking. Each person, the charity explained, that their experiences are unique. And so they've told government department staff that they need to understand they'll never truly know how other people are feeling, and that they should try to be open, they should learn, they should listen, and they should exercise empathy when dealing with kids who are identifying as animals and presumably supply large amounts of kitty litter. This has implications for Australia too, because just last week, a teacher in a Queensland school was stood down after it was revealed that she was identifying as a cat, wearing cat ears to class, licking the back of her hands and hissing at misbehaving students. In 2022, the Courier Mail reported that Brisbane Girls Grammar School had to deal with a number of students who were identifying as cats, even to the point of cutting holes in the back of their uniform so that their imagined tails could find release. What makes me curious, Kel and Liz, is this whole appeal to empathy. We're told that if you don't endorse people's feelings and validate them, then you lack empathy. And of course, no one wants to be accused of lacking empathy, because that would make you a narcissist. And this is what I would describe as toxic empathy, where it's used to bully people into suppressing what they know to be true for fear of being thought an unkind person. But of course, it's not kind to indulge people's stupidity, let alone their delusions, and let alone for children.
And this is what happens when you indulge people's delusions. This is what happens when you indulge people's fantasies. Now we've got people who are fully grown adults identifying as babies and staying at home. It's all very grotesque. Having their nappies changed and a warm Milo in their bottles. It is utterly disgusting to watch. And watching it just like this, you're once again reminded the mental health problems in today's society are just off the Richter scale. Like, we are not in Kansas anymore, ladies and gentlemen. We are so far off the reservation. But when it comes to kids, I want to start a campaign called Bring Back Bullying. Hear me out. Because if even 10 years ago, a kid had tried this on in the schoolyard, all the kids would have mercilessly mocked them, said, mate, you're not a cat and we're not going to pretend otherwise and nobody can tell us to. You're being an idiot. End of story. And they would have cut it out quick, smart. It's in this society now where we're literally, in the name of empathy and compassion, as you say, told that we must facilitate people's mental health problems. That's what this is, and it's coupled up with several other things as well. Those who identify as furries and actually go around dressed up as a cat or some other furry animal. This Children's Society says that nearly 1 in 8 furries also identifies as trans and non-binary, which is 20 times higher than those not identifying as furries. So if someone's getting around confused about what species they are, confused about what gender they are, for crying out loud, this is someone who genuinely needs psychological help, Kel.
Exactly. You said in your introduction, James, this may not be as crazy as it looks. It is. It is every
If
bit...
you follow the logic, Kel, the logic makes sense. If you start with their premise, I meant. The premise, of course, is way off the ranch.
Well, the whole of the premise is wrong. To some extent, this is a wash-up of the whole trans thinking. In other words, you aren't what reality says you are what you think you are. Now, if you start down that road, you start with boys who want to be girls and girls who want to be boys, and you end up with boys and girls who want to be dogs and cats and wild tigers. And identity politics has actually made it really hard to talk sensibly about mental health. What Liz was saying about mental health is the whole issue. The left, who advance all the identity politics, keep telling us there are mental health issues. People need to deal with these serious mental health issues, but they're not dealing with them. They're pandering to them. And I thought of a parallel, thought of anorexia. An anorexic is someone who identifies as being fat when they're in fact in a dangerously thin body. So they've got a mental problem. It's a mental health issue that they're dealing with. With anorexics, we don't say, that's all right, that's perfectly okay. If you identify as being fat, we'll say you're fat and let them starve themselves to death. In that case, we've already worked out that's not what you do. You realise it's a mental problem, not a physical problem, and you try to give them psychiatric care to get them back on track. What's the difference between that anorexic person and the girl who imagines she's a boy or the girl who imagines she's feline rather than human? It's exactly the same mental process. So we have to be honest enough to say we recognise mental health when we see it.
A pair of planes sent by Venezuela returned home with nearly 200 undocumented Venezuelan migrants who were in the United States as President Donald Trump's mass deportation effort continues. The planes departed from Fort Bliss in El Paso, Texas, and arrived in Caracas on Monday. Trump envoy Richard Grenell, who oversaw the deportations, posted on X the flights were paid for by Venezuelans. Venezuelan migrants have arrived at the southern border en masse since 2021 and are among the nationalities with the most migrants entering the United States through illegal border crossings. Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro said in response to the flights, quote, "This is the world we want, a world of peace, understanding, and dialogue and cooperation," end quote. The Venezuelan government, however, also criticized what it calls ill-intentioned false narratives by the Trump administration on the presence of Venezuelan Tren de Aragua gang members in the U.S., saying most Venezuelan migrants are industrious and decent people who have been stigmatized by the U.S. As Straight Arrow News previously reported, the deportation flights come days after some undocumented migrants were flown to Guantanamo Bay. They also follow a federal judge's temporary order to block the Trump administration from sending 3 Venezuelan men to the U.S. military base in Cuba on Sunday.
We are receiving some breaking news from the United States right now, and we do understand that U.S. President Donald Trump says he had a lengthy and a highly productive phone call with Russian President Vladimir Putin. Trump says both Washington and Moscow have agreed to immediately start negotiations to end the Russia-Ukraine war. The Kremlin says that Putin held a 1.5-hour phone call with Trump, and according to Trump, both agreed to start the Ukraine negotiations immediately. Trump also said that he agreed with Putin to visit each other's nations. The Kremlin said that both presidents agreed that the time has come to work together. Let's talk to our correspondent Susan Teherani, who's now joining us on the line from New York. Susan, what more do we know about this phone call?
As you mentioned, President Trump said the decision follows a, quote, lengthy and highly productive phone call. And also, they both expressed mutual desire to halt the conflict's extensive casualties. President Trump plans to inform Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky about this conversation. He's also directed senior officials in his administration, including Secretary of State Marco Rubio, to also lead forthcoming negotiations. Now, as you know, this is the latest development. It's breaking news, but it comes on the heels of a recent prisoner exchange where Russia released that American school teacher who had been detained for over 3 years. It's also important to note that the conversation comes after U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth emphasized that American troops will not be deployed to Ukraine as peacekeepers in any potential ceasefire deal. And at a time when Hegseth also encouraged European nations to take greater responsibility for regional security. So, you know, it was interesting because we also saw the Ukrainian defense minister put out a tweet of himself and Pete Hegseth. They had an unannounced meeting. Again, this conversation comes after that meeting between the two defense secretaries. So it'll be interesting to see Ukraine's response and to what extent Ukraine was informed of this conversation between Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump.
All right, if you're just joining us, this is just breaking news that we are receiving in our newsroom, and we do understand that President Donald Trump had a lengthy conversation with his Russian counterpart, Vladimir Putin, and it is said that both agreed to visit each other's nations in the near future, and they will hold more conversations in the future. And that was our correspondent, Susan Teherani.
We now shift our attention to the Taiwan Strait, where both America and China are flexing their naval might. Earlier today, China ramped up military operations near Taiwan, deploying warships and fighter jets for what it termed as combat readiness patrols and training exercises. The move showcased in China's state broadcaster showed Chinese naval vessels maneuvering at sea while the Chinese warplanes roared into the sky. A clear message of deterrence aimed at Taiwan and its allies. This show of force follows the passage of 2 U.S. Navy vessels through the Taiwan Strait earlier this week, the first such maneuver since U.S. President Donald Trump took office last month. China called the transit a provocation that heightened security risks. The Chinese Foreign Ministry dismissed the U.S. naval mission as an excuse to undermine China's security under the pretext of freedom of navigation.
The Eastern Theater Command of the Chinese People's Liberation Army has already responded, and I would like to emphasize that Taiwan is an inalienable part of China's territory, and that the question of Taiwan is not a matter of freedom of navigation, but a matter of China's sovereignty and territorial integrity. China firmly opposes any country provoking and threatening China's sovereignty and security in the name of freedom of navigation.
China's military says it tracked the movements of the U.S. warships, specifically a naval destroyer and a survey ship, as they moved through the Taiwan Strait between Monday and Wednesday. The PLA's Eastern Theater Command accused Washington of sending, and I'm quoting here, wrong signals to Taiwan, and warned that such actions only escalates regional tensions. According to reports, the U.S. carries out such navigation operations along the Taiwan Strait on a daily basis, sometimes joined by allied forces as well. But this was the first such exercise since Trump returned to the White House. The strategic 180-kilometer wide Taiwan Strait is a crucial global shipping lane. China insists it falls under its jurisdiction, contradicting global maritime law, which limits territorial waters to 22 kilometers from a nation's coastline. Meanwhile, Taiwan remains on a high alert, its defense ministry closely monitoring China's military movements and assured the public that the situation remained stable and under control right now. While these maritime standoffs continue, Taiwan is also taking steps to strengthen its defenses. Taipei has secured a $761 million weapons deal with Washington, purchasing 3 national advanced surface-to-air missile systems. These missile systems will reportedly enhance Taiwan's ability to defend itself against a potential Chinese invasion or a Chinese assault. Meanwhile, Chinese scientists claim to have made a breakthrough in infrared detection technology that could expose a major weakness in U.S. stealth aircraft. Well, according to Chinese researchers, an airship equipped with advanced infrared detection could identify stealth fighters like America's F-35 at distances of nearly 2,000 kilometers, which could give China a major advantage in countering U.S. military operations in the region, and aligns with China's broader strategy of manufacturing arsenal designed to keep U.S. forces at bay in the event of a conflict. According to reports, in simulated combat scenarios, Chinese researchers analyzed the infrared signatures of F-35 jets, specifically in engagements involving Taiwan. The findings reportedly suggest that American stealth technology, long considered an edge in modern warfare, may not be as indestructible as previously thought. So the military maneuvers by China and the U.S., Taiwan's growing defense partnerships with the U.S. and emerging advancements in military technology, they all point to tensions in the Taiwan Strait only growing further.
To U.S. activity in the Taiwan Strait, Beijing deployed its naval and air force around Taiwan for combat readiness patrols and training missions. Chinese media released a video showing its Eastern Theater Command conducting naval and air drills around Taiwan.
While performing combat readiness and alert missions, we always maintain a state of readiness with arrows on the string and ammunition fully loaded. Our weapon systems are also in launch-ready status, prepared to fire at any moment.
Chinese Foreign Ministry opposed the U.S. presence around Taiwan, claiming the U.S. can't threaten its sovereignty in name of navigation freedom.
The Eastern Theater Command of the Chinese People's Liberation Army has already responded, and I would like to emphasize that Taiwan is an inalienable part of China's territory, and that the question of Taiwan is not a matter of freedom of navigation, but a matter of China's sovereignty and territorial integrity. China firmly opposes any country provoking and threatening China's sovereignty and security in the name of freedom of navigation.
The military drills were held after 2 U.S. Navy ships sailed through the sensitive Taiwan Strait this week. Taiwan's defense ministry said its forces had also kept watch, but noted the situation was as normal. This marks the first U.S. mission after President Donald Trump took office last month. The U.S. Navy, occasionally accompanied by ships from allied countries, transits the strait about once a month. China, which claims Taiwan as its own territory, says the strategic waterway belongs to it.
Now, Iran's mission to the United Nations has condemned statements made by U.S. President Donald Trump, calling them reckless and inflammatory. Now, in an interview with Fox News, Trump said that he believed there were two ways of stopping Iran from developing nuclear weapons, with bombs or with a deal. On Tuesday, Iran submitted a letter to the UN Security Council to register its protest against the U.S. president's remarks. Iran's head of mission, Saeed Iravani, in the letter published in a local news agency said that such reckless and inflammatory statements flagrantly violate international law and the UN Charter, particularly paragraph 4 of Article 2, which prohibits threats or use of forces against sovereign state. The envoy warned that any act of aggression will have severe consequences. The tensions have been high between Iran and U.S. since Trump reinstated the maximum pressure policy against the country over concerns that it was seeking to develop nuclear weapons. Now, this comes despite Tehran insisting its nuclear program is solely for peaceful purposes and denied any intention to develop atomic weapons. Now, head of mission Iravani said that the policy reinforces unlawful coercive measures and escalates hostility against Iran.
אם החמאס לא ישחרר את החטופים הישראלים עד ליום השבת, ייפתחו עליהם שערי הגיהנום, בדיוק כמו שהבטיח נשיא ארצות הברית. כל הסכם הפסקת האש עם מרצחי החמאס נועד להביא לשחרורם המהיר של החטופים הישראלים המוחזקים בתנאים חמורים ביותר בעזה. ותמורת זה ישראל הסכימה לשלם מחירים כבדים. אם חמאס מפסיק את שחרור החטופים, אז אין הסכם ויש מלחמה. מלחמת עזה החדשה תהיה שונה בעוצמתה מזו שלפני הפסקת האש, ולא תסתיים ללא הכרעת החמאס ושחרור כל החטופים. והיא תאפשר גם את מימוש חזונו של נשיא ארצות הברית טראמפ ביחס לעזה.
מוטי, יאללה, חבר'ה, מי שרוצה עכשיו, כמה שניות. זוזו. לא, אורלי בבקשה. אורלי, אין לנו רעיון, בבקשה.
לא רעיונות, אבל אולי הוא יסביר.
זה לגיטימי? זה לגיטימי? הדבר הזה? באמת?
לא, צריכים לעשות דברים כאלה. לא, מר נתניהו צריך להסביר על
בעולם בית המשפט, לנהל פוליטיקה בעולם בית המשפט.
חבר'ה, תודה, ההרכב רוצה להיכנס. חבר'ה, בבקשה. חבר'ה, תודה. יאללה, אנחנו יושבים, כניסת שופטים. להוריד מצלמות בבקשה.
Mr. President, during your election campaign, Mr. President, how is the U.S. going to own Gaza? Your White House has made clear taxpayer dollars won't be used for this. So what money are you going to use to buy Gaza?
We're not going to buy anything. We're going to have it. We're going to keep it, and we're going to make sure that there's going to be peace, and there's not going to be any problem, and nobody's going to question it. And we're going to run it very properly, and eventually we'll have economic development at a very large scale, maybe the largest scale on that site. And we'll have lots of good things built there, including hotels and office buildings and housing and other things. And we'll make that site into what it should be. And the people from Gaza who wouldn't be able to be there for years, because you're talking about just to get it and prepare it and to take care of all of the problems that currently it has, as you know, tunnels, and people are in those tunnels. And you have some good people and some bad people, and you may have hostages right now. You know, you have the hostages possibly there. They don't know where they are. And, you know, I have a Saturday deadline, and I don't think they're going to make the deadline personally. I think they want to play tough guy, but we'll see how tough they are. But it's going to be a wonderful thing. It's going to be wonderful for the Middle East. I think it'll turn the Middle East. I think you're going to have peace in the Middle East. You're going to eventually have peace in the Middle East.
Fear and desperation on the streets of Tel Aviv. Israeli protesters urging their government to uphold the Gaza ceasefire deal with militant group Hamas to free all hostages, after Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu released this warning.
אם חמאס לא יחזיר את חטופינו עד שבת בצהריים, הפסקת האש תיפסק, וצה"ל יחזור ללחימה עצימה עד להכרעה סופית של החמאס.
Families of Israelis taken hostage by Hamas on October 7, 2023, say that move would lead to their loved ones' prolonged detainment and possible death sentence. In the 24 days since the ceasefire took effect, 21 Israeli hostages have been released from Gaza in return for 550 Palestinians detained in Israel. 73 hostages are thought to remain in the enclave, but with tens of thousands killed in Gaza during 15 months of fighting, it's unclear how many of those hostages are still alive.
We can't afford another arm wrestling between the sides. There is a deal. Go for it. Run.
Netanyahu's threat to resume the war comes after Hamas said they would postpone the next scheduled release of Israeli hostages on Saturday. The group blamed the delay on Israeli violations of the ceasefire deal, including shooting dead Palestinians in Gaza and failing to allow in agreed humanitarian aid. Hamas's announcement did not refer to US policy, but followed Donald Trump's pledge to take over Gaza and resettle millions of displaced Palestinians in neighbouring Jordan and Egypt. A plan both countries have vehemently opposed. But as King Abdullah of Jordan visited Trump in the White House, the US leader doubled down.
We're not going to buy anything. We're going to have it, and we're going to keep it, and we're going to make sure that there's going to be peace, and there's not going to be any problem, and nobody's going to question it, and we're going to run it very properly.
King Abdullah offered to take in 2,000 children with cancer and other serious health problems, but urged Trump to push for stability in the Middle East with diplomacy in planned meetings with Egypt.
So I think let's wait until the Egyptians can come and present it to the president and not get ahead of ourselves.
As negotiations around the future of Gaza continue, Hamas says it still may go ahead with the hostage exchange on Saturday if Israel complies with its ceasefire obligations. But emboldened by US support, Netanyahu remains steadfast in daring Hamas to back down or face war once again. James Lin and Rosie Greninger for Taiwan Plus.
What do you think about the U.S. taking over the Gaza Strip? Do you want to see the U.S. own the Gaza Strip?
Well, I think, as I said earlier, the president is looking at Egypt coming to present their plan. As I said, we will be in Saudi Arabia to discuss how we can work with the president and with the United States. So I think let's wait until the Egyptians can come and present it to the president and not get ahead of ourselves.